welcome to Destination Draft Day. I'm Michael Rochman, joined alongside with Nick Durst. We are very excited to talk to you guys as the NFL Draft Combine's been going on, as so much in the NFL has been going on. There's a lot to talk about, NFL Draft, college football, and there's no better place to talk about it than here on Destination Draft Day. But before we dive into any of it, Nick Durst, how are you doing today?
Michael, good to be back with you here. And it's your favorite week of the year, which would be the Combine week. And it's been interesting so far. And is there anybody that has kind of really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think Christian Watson from North Dakota State has absolutely blown up the Combine. Tremendous size already as it is, but running in the 4.3s, putting up tremendous numbers in the jumps, putting up tremendous numbers just in the three cone. I mean, he was doing it all. He is a tremendous athlete, a tremendous star talent. He was someone that kind of did it all for North Dakota State, getting carries, getting passes, pushing the ball downfield. The jump from the Missouri Valley Conference to the NFL is always going to be a tough one, but I think that with the way that he just lit it up at the Combine, teams are going to feel a lot more confident about what he can do at the next level, because that type of athleticism and size doesn't come often. And then Tyquan Thornton, obviously a guy that was believed to have set the record, didn't end up setting the record, but still put together a very fast 40 time with a 6'3" frame. I think he's someone that's going to get a small boost from that. I think, he's not going to fly up into the first round or anything, but I think fourth, fifth, sixth round type guy that could potentially become a deep threat in the NFL. We've seen small deep threat type guys like Marquez Callaway kind of make it work at the NFL for the New Orleans Saints. So with an option like a Tyquan Thornton where he can just absolutely blow by anyone, I think there's plenty of potential there for him to become something in the NFL. And I think NFL teams probably share that sentiment, and we could hear his name on day 3.
For me, the guy that's been the most impressive, which I'd love for my Giants to get, and he was, rumored to be on there, but I don't think he's going there anymore. And this guy himself said he wouldn't be shocked if he went number 1 overall. And that is the man who has been very impressive at the Combine, especially with the media, Ikem Ekwonu. And I'm saying that wrong. We'll call him Icky, his nickname. But the NC State tackle here. I mean, this guy, Michael, he comes in, he's going to be one of the best left tackles in the league right away. He can play right tackle, can put him at guard, depending on where you go. With the Giants, you got him and Thomas. It's a pretty good problem to have right there. But it seems like the Jaguars, might be turning their attention to him, get some protection for Lawrence, and ETN could run the ball better when he makes his debut next year. But the other shocking thing right now is that you see in a lot of these mock drafts, the guy you have going number 1 overall, Kayvon Thibodeau, he's dropping down to like the 5 to 8 range. What do you think's going on there between those two guys that they're kind of trading places?
Yeah, I don't buy that he's going to be dropping that far whenever the draft comes around, but I do think that some teams maybe are a little bit concerned about Thibodeau being this, focused off-field guy. I think there's a chance that maybe that has a small impact, but overall, I think it's going to be Hutchinson, Thibodeau 1-2, unless Evan Neal goes number 1. Just, seeing him at his frame, he looks skinny for 360 pounds. He's insane, and tremendous athlete, tremendous size. You can easily add some more weight. He could easily just continue to be a dominant player. I think he blows it away at the Combine whenever he does do testing. I think they test today, if I'm not mistaken. So I think there's plenty of potential there for the offensive line to kind of surprise. Evan Neal's a guy that I think is just an absolute stud. But ultimately, I think Thibodeau, I think this is a reactionary drop in where he's going in these mock drafts, and I think he's still going to be a top 3 selection most likely.
And what do you think about Icky rising up the draft boards right now? I mean, it's not much of a rise. You have him in that 4-5 range, but now people are saying maybe he's going to go number 1 overall.
Yeah, I mean, for Ekwonu, I think the big thing is that he has so much versatility to where you're pretty much getting a safe bet that he's going to work out in the NFL. It's just what position. As a run blocker that he is, he's probably not best suited for left tackle. I think right tackle is probably his best spot, but overall it's just going to be, if he struggles at all as a tackle, you can easily kick him inside the guard and be very happy about what he's going to bring to your team. I think there is a big safety net, and that's why the big appeal is there. He has a great run and blocking ability. He could easily develop as a pass blocker. I think he has great physicality. Kind of reminds me of Darrisaw last year. Not a comparison in any sort, but just they have similar physicality that's going to win teams over in that regard. So, put him in a power blocking scheme. He's going to make some guys just go right into the dirt. He's going to open some holes in your run game. As a pass blocker, there's some things to grow in, but I think he's still got plenty of promise in that regard to where he could be one of the more impressive early tackles in this draft.
Absolutely. The other storyline this week, the storyline to pop up, Kenny Pickett, his hands, everyone's saying too small. He got measured, I think it was 8.5 inches or something. I don't know if you heard about that story, Michael, but that to me is a non-story about hand size. But, your guy, the one you projected going first overall from the quarterbacks, Willis, he's been the talk of the combine as far as the quarterbacks is concerned.
Yeah, I think this is someone that just has way too much talent to be missed out on. So when you get this opportunity to really see him up front and personal, I think you kind of start to realize what's special about him. And that's why I've been a big fan of him. I think on tape, he just absolutely pops off way more than any other QB in this class. And you look at around the league, I mean, the top 2 QBs in this league right now, or top 3 even, Rodgers, Mahomes, Allen. All 3 have powerful arms, very nice mobility to extend plays, and the ability to kind of, create plays with their arm where it's not just throwing downfield, but being able to just throw at any angle. And Malik Willis offers that upside to where you can unlock that and potentially get a top QB in this draft. It's been widely regarded as a class that has issues, that's a weak QB class, but ultimately you can make it work with anyone. I mean, Lamar Jackson went 32. Josh Allen wasn't seen as a safe bet as a QB. You know that more than anyone because I was coming on to the Facebook Lives that you were hosting with Bleacher Report, and I said, man, Josh Allen's not going to work. He's going to be a bust. QB perception.
Patrick Mahomes wasn't a top 5 pick.
Yeah, exactly.
How about the Commanders trying to trade for Patrick Mahomes this week? Did you see that? What are they going to offer him? What are they going to offer him? They called the Chiefs apparently.
Literally whatever they want. They were probably like, you can have any 5 players, any 5 draft picks. We'll give it to you. And I'm sure the Chiefs are like, yeah, no, thank you. But, I mean, the QB perception before the draft isn't entirely that important because ultimately it matters what you do with that QB once he arrives in your organization. And with Malik Willis, you have plenty of upside to create what is a franchise caliber QB and what could really be, I'm not saying that he's going to be, but the upside is there for him to be like the top quarterback in the league. Like,
give me a Willis comparison. Do you think? Well, first, give me based on last year's class. Is he like a Trey Lance where he's going to come in and he'd sit, and then give me overall someone that kind of comes to mind for you where you think he can kind of maybe follow the same career type of trajectory.
I think he is someone you don't want to sit because he's 23 years old. And mobility helps a lot for younger QBs to where I think he could find some success early on. But as a comparison, I think Tyrod Taylor is probably the initial placement where I'd have him. Obviously, if you're an NFL team, you're hoping that he develops into a little bit higher than Taylor, obviously. But I think Taylor has a lot of similar skills in terms of similar frame. They have rockets for an arm. They have great mobility. Taylor came into a league that was very pocket passer centric. So a lot of teams weren't going to allow him to kind of develop into his game. And he had to mold his own game into, okay, I need to stay in the pocket. I need to develop as a passer, yada, yada. I think with Malik Willis, he gets that opportunity to kind of become his own thing, develop into his strengths rather than trying to fit a mold of something that he's not. And I think that offers a much higher ceiling. But overall, I think if I were to just kind of play it safe with a comparison, I think Tyrod Taylor's a similar skill set. Now, can Malik Willis develop into a higher caliber player?
Fair enough. And what have you heard, or, what have you seen out of, I mentioned Pickett with his hands and him and Hal and Corral. What have you heard or seen about them this week?
Yeah, so, it seems like both are going to be first-round QBs. Pickett obviously has the hand issue, but this is something that was known by a lot of NFL teams in terms of he had small hands. It was something that was widely regarded, probably following his junior season. So I don't think NFL teams are going to say, "Oh, we love Pickett," and then see his hand measurement and then just completely write him off. The issue when it comes to these measurements isn't okay. Now they have a small hand, they're done. It's okay. How does a small hand impact their play? That's where my issue comes in with Pickett because I think there is a little bit of seen issues when it comes to controlling the football on passes that once the ball gets bigger, once the windows get tighter, there could easily be some issues at the next level, and that's what scares me with Pickett. But for a lot of teams, they probably don't feel the same. And so, yes, you probably wish he had bigger hands, but overall, you're absolutely fine with that, and you're saying, okay, in terms of skill set, we still love him. So, I mean, there's going to be overreactions, especially from the media side of things. They're like, oh, Pickett has some of the smallest hands we've ever seen. He's going to fall to round 3, round 4. Like, it's not going to happen. He's still going to be a first-round pick. There's still going to be teams that believe in him as their franchise savior. And now the question is where that happens. And I think Pickett seems to be likely as the second QB off the board. And then it kind of becomes a coin toss between Corral and Howell for who goes next.
Interesting. So, do you think there's any way that the pro days can change your rankings, or are you pretty much set in your top 4 for quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I have left in terms of QB evaluations is I need to fully evaluate Ritter. That's the one guy that I've been I've watched him plenty. It's just I'm not sure where I want to place him just yet. I've swung and missed on guys that are high ceiling, high potential, and just not a lot of polish. And then I've completely disregarded guys like that and then completely missed out on being right on them. So for a guy like Ritter with fastest QB 40 time, obviously not everyone ran, but I think he probably would have been at least like a top 3 guy. With the arm talent that he has, there's plenty of potential there. But, the question is, can he kind of fix his accuracy issues? Can he develop into a more consistent passer? And if he can, then he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks from this class. But if he can't, then we could easily see him get replaced within 1 to 2 years as a quarterback in the league. So Desmond Ritter is a guy that has potential, and I still need to develop or really dive into his film and make an official decision on him. But for the rest of the guys, those top 5, Carson Strong, Sam Howell, Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, I'm feeling fairly certain on where they'll be ranked.
So I know you had Willis going to the Giants in your mock draft, but do you think there's any chance that we see 0 QBs taken in the top 10 for the first time since 2013?
I think the way that would happen would be, Panthers make their trade for one of their QBs, whether that's Jimmy Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins, some of those guys that they've been rumored about, maybe Deshaun Watson as well. So the Panthers would have to trade for one, and then the Broncos would have to kind of make that trade for Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, maybe sign a Jameis Winston, trade for Kirk Cousins, whatever that is. So if those deals happen, we could potentially see a QB fall all the way to, that 11, 12, maybe not 13, maybe like 15, 16 spot with Philly. I don't know. But ultimately, I feel like a team's likely going to trade up. There's been talk about Pittsburgh that's been heavy, that they love Malik Willis and they want to trade up for him. There's been talk about some other teams as well. Obviously, New Orleans is kind of up in the air with what's going to happen with Jameis Winston. There's talks about Tennessee potentially looking for the QB of their future. So there's plenty of options out there for teams that could move up into this top 10. If I had to bet, I would say a QB goes top 10 just because it's unlikely that all these teams kind of resolve their issue at the quarterback spot. But ultimately, there's certainly an avenue where it's very possible.
What do you think is, going to be, how will this draft and last year's draft kind of change the way that recruiting's done on the college level? Because it seems like every year you got, these D2 guys like Trey Lance all of a sudden being big stars into the draft, Malik Willis going to a smaller school, etc. Why is it that you think these guys are being missed when it comes to recruiting on the college level and they end up at the smaller schools?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because Malik Willis was recognized and he went to Auburn, and then they chose Bo Nix over him. And Bo Nix, I mean, I'm not trying to be a rude guy to Bo Nix, but he was never really much at the Auburn level. Transferred to Oregon this season, but it just seems like a lot of teams aren't willing to recognize the tools aspect of it, and they instead want to just find the guy that's going to hand the ball off efficiently, kind of be quick passing, make that work. And in terms of college football, yeah, that can work for some of these teams, but at the same time, there's plenty of opportunity where there's just guys that are going to be great talents that are getting opportunities at lower level schools where they can really just be the whole show, and that's going to help them kind of develop into that star role. So, I mean, does this mean that we're just going to see consistent G5 players that are top tier draft talents? Maybe not, but I do think that we're going to see just consistent players that maybe don't work out at the Power 5 level, transfer down, get to really become the focal point of the offense, have the offense structured around them. And from that, I think we could see some very intriguing pieces that develop into potential high draft picks.
Look forward to it. Are you very, very high on Willis? Like, as you think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league, or is it that you're saying this draft he's the best? Where would you stack him up with, let's say, the guys from last year?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of last year's class, I think I would probably have Willis as QB4. Really like Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Justin Fields as the top three. Fields is my QB2, Lance QB3. But
what about your guys, Matt? Your guy Mac? My guy Zach Wilson?
I had Mac as QB5, very close with Wilson. They were both kind of interchangeable, but ultimately, I think I like Willis a little bit more. I think there's just more tools in terms of just upside for what can happen there. I think Mac obviously has shown that he should be a very safe QB for the long term, but I think in terms of what I look for in prospects, I've kind of changed to where I like the upside aspect of a lot of these guys, and I say, look, you get a talent like that, you try to develop them and see what you can do rather than taking the safe option. And while Mac Jones obviously looks very good for his first season, I think there is a reasonable expectation of there could easily be a limit on what he can become because of his maybe lack of strong arm or lack of mobility as a QB. And maybe in a system like the Patriots, that's fine. But at the same time, for other teams, they're probably more excited to have the tools EQBs. And that's why I lean Willis. And Wilson has those tools, but I think there's just some aspects of his downfield passing game that I didn't love as much.
All right. Now, before I talk about some more player stuff, just want to talk about some rumors. They always come around here when the league year starts. So right now, it seems like the Chiefs are going to try to work out a contract extension with Tyreek Hill. At some point, this team's going to be in a bad space with the cap between Hill, Kelsey, and Mahomes. They're going to have most of their salaries tied up in those three. So we'll see how that progresses over the years, but you have to extend him, of course. Giants rumored to be open to trading Barkley, looking to trade James Bradbury. Looks like they want to bring back Sterling Shepard. They already cut Rudolph. They better keep Blake Martinez, but they might cut him as well. The Cowboys are trying to trade Amari Cooper. I guess they're picking Cooper over Ezekiel Elliott. We talked a little bit during the season that maybe the Cowboys like to move on from Elliott after the season, but they're not going to. The Bills are going to look to trade Cole Beasley. And your guy on the Patriots, J.C. Jackson, not going to get the franchise tag. He's going to go straight to free agency. So a lot to digest there. Any of those really interest you, Michael, or is it kind of just like, well, it's not much to talk about this time other than the prospects? So let's start up some rumors here on what's going on with potential people, moving around here.
Yeah, I'm not intrigued at all by the idea that the Patriots are going to let J.C. Jackson walk. This seems like an arrogant move on Belichick's end. I know Belichick's Belichick. He'll probably find a way to where it's fine. but you have a top-end talent at cornerback. You're letting them hit the open market for a market that's desperate for cornerback talent. You have teams like the Cincinnati Bengals who are fresh off of a Super Bowl visit that could easily spend the money to get them. You have a team like the Raiders that have so much Patriots personnel to where they're going to love to potentially court him and bring him in. You have a team like the Chargers that are young and up and coming, and they need a top corner to kind of help solidify that team. So it feels like a very risky move by the Patriots. I know that they consistently do this where they'll let their guys hit the open market, check back with them, see what offers they get, but I think you get outbid in this situation. So I don't like the move at all. I think you should be tagging J.C. Jackson, bringing him back for another year, work on an extension in the meantime. But, if I had to guess, I assume Bill is probably going to end up missing out on J.C. Jackson and then trying to make a trade elsewhere. I'm not sure what that trade would be. Maybe it's acquiring like a James Bradbury from the Giants, who seems to be hot in the trade market. Maybe it's looking at Byron Jones, Xavier Howard from the Dolphins. I think there's options out there, but ultimately I'd prefer J.C. Jackson. I think he's a top 5 corner in the NFL, and I really don't like this move for the Patriots if they intend to keep Jackson because I think they get outbid.
Yeah, he's going to certainly be a hot commodity on the market. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And, I think there's just so much that you're missing out on if you lose him because the cornerback unit becomes abysmal for the Patriots. I mean, Jalen Mills didn't really step up to the contract that you paid him. Joanne Williams hasn't really developed into anything. Jonathan Jones is your only, stud at the cornerback position. And he's a slot guy that's like a strong safety, free safety, nickel playing wherever, but you can't put him on the outside. So right now, outside corner, if J.C. Jackson walks, becomes priority number 1 for the Patriots.
All right. All right, Michael. Well, that's really it for the rumors. The only other thing that I wanted to maybe talk about is what do you see happening with Odell Beckham Jr. because he is a free agent. He was phenomenal for the Rams. He's out until probably late November. So I would assume then that kind of goes in the Rams' benefit where they're going to be able to sign him to just a 1-year deal and kind of bring him back because I don't think everybody's going to give him a long-term deal at this point coming off the injury when he's going to miss 2.5 months of the season.
Yeah, I think Odell Beckham Jr. probably ends up back with the Rams. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of see a short-term deal, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the Rams give him a deal of good faith and say, look, we think you're our guy for the long term at the wide receiver spot. We obviously have Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson, but we think we need you here, so they give him a long-term deal. Ultimately, I think there's plenty of upside there for Odell Beckham Jr. to stay in the Rams offense. I think that's a great trio, just overall wide receiver room. I think that the Rams are going to pay him at the very least a 1-year deal. I think he's probably going to come back, do very well. I know that there's concern about when he'll be able to return, but I think right now, he comes back after staying on the PUP for 6 weeks, and then he's fine, and then the Rams have one of the better offenses in football. So I think there's plenty of reason for the Rams to want to keep him, and I think they will.
Excellent point there. All right, Michael, what teams are we going to look at today?
Yeah, so first one we're talking about is the Minnesota Vikings. And we start out this draft with them pulling someone that was really perceived to be a top 5 pick preseason, has had his drops because the consistency just isn't there. But Derek Stingley, corner out of LSU, offers plenty of upside as an athlete, offers plenty of intrigue as a prospect. This is someone that if you told anyone in the NFL, anyone that scouts, this guy ends up being the top corner in this class, I don't think anyone would be shocked by it. I think there is plenty of potential there for Derek Stingley to become something special. And so the Vikings do that and bring him in, and they solidify their room because, as you can see with this mock offseason, they don't have a ton of space, but I think they go out and get 3 main guys. And that's bringing back Patrick Peterson, signing Desmond King to be their slot corner, and signing center Brian Allen to be their final piece on the offensive line, or at least hopefully their final piece. I think by making these moves, you ultimately create a much better situation for your team. You help out the offense. The question is what's going to happen in the future with the Vikings. I mean, Kirk Cousins is really kind of the uncertain part of this future, but I think when you look at what they can become, what they can really do with this offseason, you're looking at a guy like Brian Allen to kind of solidify the offensive line and help your offense. And hopefully with pieces like Derek Stingley and Devontae Wyatt as their second-round pick, with pieces like Patrick Peterson and Desmond King added to the secondary, you really get this tremendous payoff on your defense. So, yeah, Devontae Wyatt is the pick at 46. That's a guy that I think really has tremendous upside. I think him and Jordan Davis, I mean, that duo was a lot better than a lot of NFL defensive tackle duos. And I know that's crazy to say, but that Georgia defense is going to be looked at as almost like a Miami Hurricanes roster of 2002 type deal because there's just so much NFL talent all over the roster. Devontae Wyatt could easily be considered one of the best talents on that group. Adding him to the Vikings on a team that needs that help on the defensive line, a team that could very easily become like this 3-4 defense potentially. They're kind of looking at both. I think Wyatt is scheme versatile. I think he's going to be a stud at the NFL level. And for the Vikings, adding him here, huge gain for them to really kind of move forward in this draft. At 77, I have him going Leo Chenal, linebacker out of Wisconsin. Their linebacker unit is really kind of getting decimated in terms of free agency. I mean, I think right now they probably bring back Eric Kendricks. Or I think Eric Kendricks is on the roster, sorry, but I don't think they bring back Anthony Barr. So they bring in Leo Chenal, get him back on the or get him on the team, fill in that linebacker room with young talent with Chaz Surratt, Troy Dye, but I think Leo Chenal added in there. You get some clarity on the position and you get an answer with one of those guys. At 155, I have him going Justin Schaefer. This is someone that I think is just crucial in terms of adding to the offensive line. Wyatt Davis, we didn't really get to see in a big role last year. He was consistently just not getting time. So you get someone else in that situation. You get someone to kind of at least push for the spot. Whoever wins between the two, I think you feel comfortable about. Justin Schaefer, very talented offensive lineman that was huge for the Georgia running game and huge for them winning a championship last season. At 182, I have him going Bubba Bolden, safety out of Miami. I think you just add depth to the room. This is someone that I think has plenty of talent, size, frame, everything that you could want to be intrigued about by a safety. He's going to offer it. I know that Cameron Bynum, Harrison Smith is a very good duo, but Harrison Smith is getting up there in age. Adding some of these flyer safeties in the strong safety spot, I think, is good for them. So adding a guy like Bubba Bolden, who could very easily be a steal of this draft because of some of the other safety talent just flying up the board and him kind of dropping as a result, I think you could get this guy, maybe get a nice starting piece for your secondary in the long-term future. At 190, I have him going tight end Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State. There's plenty of upside here with him. Nice receiver, nice frame, good blocker for the Iowa State Cyclones. I think he is someone that's going to stick around in the league, probably one of the guys that's going to be underestimated in this class because as time goes on, some of these other prospects that are going to be more gambled on for their upside aren't going to work out, where Charlie Kohler, I think, has a nice floor, nice safe type player. And in the Rams offensive system, you know, they like to have some decent tight ends in there. I wouldn't be surprised if Kohler is able to become that guy for this team and really help out in the tight end room. Ultimately, though, he's backup right now. It's just a pick where you get him and you see what he can become. At 207, I have him picking Braylon Sanders out of Ole Miss, wide receiver that I think really has some nice skill set. Someone that I expected to kind of pop off this season. Dontario Drummond ended up being the guy that really kind of did it all for the Rebels, but I think Braylon Sanders still has plenty of intrigue as a prospect, and I think that's why here at 207, you know, you take the flyer on him, you see what he can become. The Vikings really got tremendous payout in terms of production from KJ Osborne, so getting him to be that third wide receiver I think is very nice. You get Braylon Sanders, though, to add depth to this room with Amir Smith-Marset, and I think you have a very complete wide receiver room that's very young as well. And then at 230, I have him going Vincent Gray, the corner out of Michigan, who, you know, nice talent, nice athleticism. I think he adds depth to this room. You can kind of trust him with his experience that he had in college to hopefully kind of fill in as a rotational corner for this team. You know, with the age of Patrick Peterson, with the still question marks of play from Derek Stingley, you still want to double dip at the cornerback spot, and I think Vincent Gray is a nice option here late in the draft. So looking at how this draft pays out to the roster on the offense, you're looking at Kirk Cousins at QB, Dalvin Cook at running back, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and KJ Osborne at the receiver spot. Irv Smith returns at tight end after being injured. I think Charlie Kohler could easily get some snaps. Tyler Conklin could easily be there as well. But right now, I think Smith is the main guy. On the line, you're looking at Darisaw, Cleveland, Brian Allen, Wyatt Davis, and Brian O'Neill. I think the big question mark there is what happens at right guard. Can Justin Schaefer maybe take Wyatt Davis' spot? Can Wyatt Davis actually make the development that you invested a second-round pick in him with? There's plenty of question marks. The line wasn't perfect last year, but I think adding a guy like Brian Allen, adding some talent in the draft with a guy like Justin Schaefer, you can feel a lot more comfortable about your offensive line unit and hopefully really kind of open up this offense that has had some good moments and then at times kind of went stagnant. So, Nick, just looking at this first group, you're a big Kirk Cousins guy. You think he is certainly underestimated in regards to the rest of the league with a approach like this where they maybe don't overhaul the offense, but they add some more safety on the offensive line. They add some rotational pieces in the draft. What do you think the Vikings' upside is for this offense, especially with a new offensive system in place?
Yeah, I think this is a playoff caliber offense and team. Bringing back Cousins, who I think is very good. He had one of his better years of his career last year. Although there is some rumors maybe that move him. I don't see why you'd move him. Dalvin Cook, one of the better running backs when healthy. Justin Jefferson, one of the best receivers. Adam Thielen, maybe the best, if not one of the top 3 best number 2 receivers in the league. You mentioned Irv Smith coming back. Get Brian Allen, should help a bit. This is a really solid team, and I definitely like the upside here of this offense for sure.
So, the big question mark is probably on the offensive line, but they've done a nice job of adding pieces. Brian O'Neill's still very young, but one of the more underrated right tackles in the league. Christian Darisaw had a very strong rookie year. Do you think they need to, dive into this offseason with, we need to fix up the offensive line, or do you think they just continue down the path of, let's continue drafting some talent, let's give Garrett Bradbury at center another year? What do you think the solution is for the Vikings there on the offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, it can't hurt to take an offensive lineman and kind of just, get some more depth there. But, overall for this team last year, offense really wasn't their issue. It was more so some defensive slip-ups, which is uncharacteristic of Mike Zimmer defense. So, if you're on the board in the middle of the first round here, like the Vikings are, I would say you're probably going to be better off going defense there. Be more options for you at that spot, and then I would just go depth wise, rounds 2 or 3 or so, looking for some offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. Now, looking over on the defensive side of things, Dalvin Tomlinson, Armani Watson, Devontae Wyatt at linebacker, or at defensive line, Danielle Hunter and DJ Wanham at edge. I think edge is the big thing that a lot of people would kind of call the question in this mock offseason, but I think with pieces like DJ Wanham, pieces like Patrick Jones II, pieces like Kenny Willekes, I think there's upside here for the edge room to kind of develop with a fixed-up secondary. So in the secondary, you got Cameron Dantzler, you got Derek Stingley, you got Patrick Peterson, and then you got Desmond King. At linebacker, you got Eric Kendricks, Leo Chenal, and then at safety, you have Cameron Bynum and Harrison Smith. Nick, this is going to be the big question mark, is going to be the Vikings defense, which, as you said, uncharacteristically bad last season. With the new system in place, I think a lot of people are kind of intrigued to see what they do at corner. It seems like they're all but a lock to look at the position in the draft. What do you think a talent like Stingley could do for this unit in terms of changing the narrative on the Vikings defense and changing the narrative on the Vikings cornerback position?
Well, I know they're like 10-year age difference, but I like that you said they'll bring back Patrick Peterson. I think he could be a really great mentor to Stingley. If Stingley is willing to listen, of course. They have that, LSU connection there, so perhaps that's something there mentorship-wise. But they need some secondary help. You got them signing King as well. Harrison Smith, I thought, was really impressive last year. Dalvin Tomlinson, I guess, left Vikings fans are left a lot to be desired in his first year with the team. Him and Williams had a great year the year before with the Giants, but I think that's because they were together. Both of those guys struggled a bit as a solo act, so to say, last year. So, if Devontae Wyatt could step in there right away and make an impact, that would pay dividends for this roster.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This is going to be a team that I think has plenty of upside in regards to what's going to happen with, the new regime. I think this is easily a situation where I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of turn this around, especially if Rodgers ends up leaving. There's been talks that he's maybe looking at potentially staying. There seems to be heavy rumors in that regard. But I think the big question mark that I'd be curious about for this team is really the scheme change and what happens with this new offense and just overall regime. But, are you less worried about coaches that come from the system with the success that these coaches have now had? Or do you think that, it's still such a young, unproven head coach that we could easily see some issues year one where, maybe the Vikings have some growing pains for the new regime?
Yeah, I think year one there should be growing pains. I think. Look at Zach Taylor. Luckily, the Bengals gave him a chance to stick around for a third year, but these things take time, especially when it comes for like this hot offensive mind here to kind of get things up and running off the ground when they come for such success. So, I think they could be a playoff team as the last wild card. If Rodgers is gone, they're probably the favorites to win the division. But I think there'll definitely be some head-scratching moments for sure in the first year with this regime.
Yeah, I think I could easily see that as well. There's upside here for them to become something in terms of just, talent on the roster. But I do think that there is easily some moments where we're going to see questions on what Kirk Cousins can become for this team. We're going to see questions on, just the overall upside for a team like this. I think there's plenty of reason to feel confident in what they can do, but at the same time, it's going to depend on how these teams around them do. I think the Bears still have upside to become something. Packers easily could bring back Rodgers, bring back Adams, and probably still win the division, even if they have to overhaul a lot of the rest of the unit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the Vikings are a team that you have to be intrigued by, that you have to kind of never discount because the roster talent's there. You look at what they can bring with a wide receiver group of Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson. You have to look at what they can bring in terms of just dominant pieces. But I think if you are looking for a team that is top 15 pick and going to turn it around next season, Vikings have to be one of the better bets. Denver obviously going to be considered, but if they don't get a QB, then who knows? Cleveland, Baltimore, the teams that we're going to talk about here quickly after. There's upside there for.
Yeah,
for
I would say
teams,
the Vikings for sure, and I think you got to say the Falcons are in that boat because they did win 7 games last year. They are not going to have to play Brady. They're not going to deal with Sean Payton, so it wouldn't surprise me if the Falcons are making the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of reason to think that the Falcons could do it. Matt Ryan looks good. I think I would probably feel a little bit safer going with the Vikings just because of the kind of question marks of age around Matt Ryan and the question marks on defense still that exist for the Falcons. But there's a lot of talent here on Minnesota, and if they are able to kind of fix up the secondary, if Derek Stingley is able to kind of play to his potential, if adding pieces like a Desmond King, Brian Allen to the offensive line, I think that creates a great opportunity for Minnesota to kind of patch up what has been long-standing issues for this team, and that could easily help them make that jump from a team that's competitive in every game but could never really kind of become a contender to, hey, we got a great team. We win in the regular season. We had a semi-easy division. Now we're feeling well-rested heading into playoffs, and we are one of the top 3 seeds. So I think there's plenty of potential here for Minnesota to have a quick turnaround with the new regime, and I'm excited to see what happens, especially if they follow a similar blueprint here. So, Nick, if you were to set expectations on this team, what should fans, be expecting in regards to the Vikings this season?
I think they should be expecting this team to be fighting for the playoffs right until week 18. And I think that's the reason why they got rid of Zimmer, because they expect to be in the playoffs. So, new regime, the expectation will be to be in the playoffs, and I think they're going to be right there till the end.
Makes sense. All right, so now we move on from the Minnesota Vikings to a team that also expects to make playoffs, and a coach that came from Minnesota, the Cleveland Browns. And I have them signing Amari Cooper in the offseason. We talked about it earlier in the show. The Cowboys are expected to release Amari Cooper. I think the Browns need to be all over that. No wide receiver talent right now. I think they cut Jarvis Landry. You cut Case Keenum, and you're looking at having a ton of money in terms of space. So, you use that money to go and get Amari Cooper, and you solidify your wide receiver room with drafting Drake London in the first round. In terms of re-signings, I think they get David Njoku. I think they re-sign a lot of their defense with Malik Jackson, Anthony Walker, Jadeveon Clowney. And then you sign Rashad Higgins, who I think is a nice rotational piece for the wide receiver unit. But Drake London in the first round, you add that depth, that deep threat wide receiver talent. You add a guy that I think opens up this offense. You allow Baker Mayfield to kind of pass downfield a little more, which is something that he's kind of voiced as not being able to kind of get that opportunity as a passer. So you get a guy like London that I think really opens up that opportunity for your team. You feel tremendous about it because this is someone that has plenty of upside. Probably would have been one of the higher time runners in this class. I think he is an absolute burner. That, yes, there's definitely a need for development in that regard in terms of just what he can become. But, adding a piece like London to this offense for an offense that has desperately needed wide receiver help, that was a big issue last year. You already have the established ground game of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. You really open up this offense to become something spectacular, and I think that really kind of plays well off of each other with Cooper and London. I think you open up the chance to kind of get back into competing for this division that now has kind of swung in the favor of Cincinnati long term. You still always have Baltimore that's going to be in contention. Pittsburgh could easily get a QB and be in contention. So you have to make moves that put yourself in position to contend. And, I think adding a guy like Drake London with Amari Cooper in this offense could really kind of, tremendously pay off for what they want to hope to do with Mayfield going forward. What are your thoughts just initially on the potential of Cooper hitting the market, and do you think he could potentially be a Browns target?
I don't really know what much more Cooper has left at this point. He's not a wide receiver one, so I don't know if this is the best fit for him because he's got to be the wide receiver one. This will be his third team, so usually when a wide receiver hits their third team, things don't go too well.
I think that's fair. Another guy that I have them going for is Emmanuel Sanders on the market. I forgot to add that into the graphic. But I think Sanders is someone that could add some dependability in the wide receiver room. Obviously, another guy that has some age on him, so maybe not the most splashy of additions, but I think he adds productivity. I think he adds a little bit of a safety blanket to the room. I think he is a guy that, can play inside out, can play anywhere you need him. And for the Browns, a team that has just kind of consistently needed wide receiver help over these past couple of years, a guy like Sanders is exactly what they need because he just tremendously helps out in terms of just consistency at the position. So adding Emmanuel Sanders on a quick one year, $5 million type deal, with the second round pick though, I think they move on to adding to the defensive line. Malik McDowell seemed to really break out this season and look poised to come back, and then he ended up getting arrested again. So I think there's going to be a question of, can we really trust him to be our long-term answer at the position? So they add a guy like George Karlaftis, who I think should be a first-round pick. But based on recent rumors, it sounds like he's going to be falling out of the first round entirely. Just not enough length on him. There's some questions in terms of power. I think he still has plenty of upside. Letting him work as an inside-outside guy like the Browns would do, I really like this acquisition. He plays on the inside here initially because he isn't Myles Garrett or Jadeveon Clowney, but there's plenty of upside here for him to become something for the Browns. And I think as he rotates around, gets used for his versatility, you would really kind of see him pay off. And this is what the Browns do. They take advantage of the situation. And I think a guy like, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a great example where a lot of teams didn't really know what they would do with him. So they didn't draft him. And then the Browns said, okay, we'll take him. We'll figure out what to do with him. And he ended up being one of the better linebackers out of the rookie class last year. I think Karlaftis, maybe not a question of what will we do with him, but I think there's maybe a question of what will he become. I think the Browns are able to kind of swing for the fence here and make that risk. And I think it would pay off in a major way for them. And that's why I think, Karlaftis here at 44 is a tremendous pick for them. And I think it would really result in some intrigue on the defense. At 78, I have him going Max Mitchell, offensive tackle out of Louisiana. I think when you look at what's going to be the situation for the Browns, I think they spend a lot of their early picks on immediate needs, but right now they fill in most of their needs immediately. So now they're looking at what do we do long term. And Jack Conklin reworked his deal and could easily be a long-term Brown, but I wouldn't be surprised if with the free agents that they have coming up next year, if Conklin's a guy that can't really return because they have to pay Mayfield. They plan on paying Njoku. They would probably want to keep some of their other guys, able to be paid. So that kind of leaves them trying to make some cuts. They have to pay Denzel Ward as well. So they need to kind of plan ahead with this draft. And I think getting a guy like Max Mitchell, training him up to be the replacement for Conklin in the long term is absolutely crucial for the Browns, and it really becomes an option here as the team gets back into hopefully competing for a playoff spot. On the next pick at 98, I think they look at the edge rusher. Look, Jadeveon Clowney has filled in quite nicely for the defensive end spot, but I think ultimately he's not your long-term answer. Again, this is probably a short-term deal that they give him, so they need to look for a guy to be a long-term answer with the rookie contract. And I think that comes in the form of Boye Mafe, the edge rusher out of Minnesota. Just tremendous athlete, tremendous upside and length, nice power, nice ability. He's someone that still needs to develop. I think he's still very much a work in progress, and that's why you bring him in now with a year to work on him. And he could really pay off in a major way. I think I might be sleeping on how early he goes. There's plenty of people that would say, no way he lasts to 98. I actually, now even thinking about it, I think I left him on the board way too long. So I'm going to switch this up to
we have a trade to announce.
Someone else. It probably won't be Boye Mafe. Maybe like a Zachary Carter on the defensive line, and then you're hoping for Karlaftis to kind of play that edge spot. I think that there's plenty of upside, though, for where they just need to address the spot at defensive line and really kind of look for who's going to be the long-term answer there, because you have Myles Garrett. So you're going to have a lot of payoff for your younger guys that are going to kind of, get the benefit of never being the focus of the defense with guys like Myles Garrett, but you need to find a way to kind of get that talent in and establish right now before it's too late and you're kind of rushing to do it with rookies that just do not make it happen. At 116, I have him going Mario Goodrich, the corner out of Clemson. I think you add him into that unit. You're not replacing Denzel Ward. This isn't trying to find a long-term answer, but I do think you want some depth at the room. You may eventually have to look at finding another outside corner. Well, I guess not so much looking for an outside corner, but you may have to eventually, add some talent to this room in terms of Troy Hill could be leaving eventually with just the payments that need to go out. So, with this move, I think you get some depth on the outside. You add some more talent with the injury history that has existed for Greg Newsome, even for Denzel Ward. It's nice to have some additional depth, and I think Mario Goodrich could easily provide that. At 154, I have him going Tyquan Thornton. We just talked about him earlier. He blew away the combine with tremendous speed, believed to have set the record at his first run. Didn't end up doing it. It was a unofficial 4.21, but it ended up being a 4.28 officially. Still blazing speed. They drafted Anthony Schwartz. I think they're going to have similar aspirations in seeing what Tyquan Thornton can do. Winner gets a roster spot. I think they're willing to take that risk. And with Tyquan Thornton, 6'3", 180 pound with 85 percentile arm length, I think there's plenty of potential there for him to become something at the NFL. And I think for the Browns, if you're looking for a guy that can really kind of potentially boom, then I think a guy like Tyquan Thornton is a great pickup. At 199, I have him going Tariq Carpenter, a guy that really just is such a weird story. I have utility listed as position because he can kind of do any position. He's a corner right now at the college level, and he leaves Georgia Tech with plenty of upside and plenty of questions of where he'll play. People believe linebacker. People could think safety. I think he can do it all, and I think that's why the Browns would love him. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah paid off in a big way for that versatility. I know that would kind of be overlapping maybe a little bit in terms of usage, but I think with a guy like that, you take him and you make it work, and you see what can happen with him. And at the very least, he's a high contributing special teams player for the Browns, and I think that's perfectly fine with them even if that's all they get for him. So plenty of upside there for him to really kind of flourish in a Browns scheme and defensive system that really capitalizes on versatility, that really kind of lets players play as themselves, play as who they are, and they kind of make it work around them rather than trying to force them into certain molds. And I think that's perfect for Carpenter in terms of what he will become at the next level. I want to see a team that kind of allows him to be this versatile weapon and see what he can become from that. And, I think with a spot like Cleveland, there's a few other spots that come to mind that could easily do that. Indianapolis is one. But, I think in a spot like Cleveland, it would be very intriguing to see what he could become, because I think they would actually let him be him. And that's probably the biggest key to success when it comes to developing your young talent, is allowing them to kind of develop in the build of themselves rather than trying to force them to be a different mold. And then with the last pick of this draft, I have the Browns going Cade York, kicker out of LSU. I think you're looking at a team that really just has so much in terms of talent, but they really have a question mark at the kicker spot. Chase McLaughlin, a free agent this year. As far as I know, he wasn't tremendous, so I think they could easily look for a new kicker. Cade York is someone that reminds me of Robbie Gould in terms of just consistency at the position. So I think you add a guy like him to this unit, you add him to the secondary or to the special teams unit, and you're happy with the consistency that he provides. Even if he doesn't have the most powerful leg in the world, I think he's still going to be a long-term kicker at the NFL. So, Nick, just first thoughts on the draft in this regard, what they could really do with the team or with a draft like this, offseason like this. Do you think the Browns can easily kind of turn things around from what was a disappointing season?
I don't know, Michael. I think the Browns' window's closed. I think last year was it. I don't really, I guess, cap purposes, but I don't understand why you would get rid of Jarvis Landry. And obviously, Odell Beckham Jr. showed he wasn't the issue. I don't know. I just have a lot of hesitation here saying I think the Browns are going to be a consistent winning team now. I feel like everything is there to have this team spiral out of control. And I'm not really sure what can be done to stop that. But obviously, they are a run-first team. Their offensive line is okay. Defensive line is very good with Myles Garrett. So when you have the right idea here, which would be taking a wide receiver with the first pick, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I didn't realize the time, so we're going to look at the offense real quick. We won't even look at the defense, so I'll talk about it. But I mean, Baker Mayfield, that's the big question mark. Do you think he is a long-term answer for this team, or do you think that they should maybe consider the idea of letting him walk?
I mean, that's why they have that 50-year option. So let me see him play this year, and we'll take it from there. He definitely deserves to play this season, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I think there is plenty of intrigue here. You know, in terms of what Browns fans should expect, what do you think the upside is for Cleveland this year? Do you think they should be expecting, just hopefully making playoffs, or do you think they should be expecting much higher? Because, I mean, there's upside there, but it hasn't really panned out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be thinking, we're going to the playoffs. We had all this COVID last year, so we make the playoffs. But you're losing you lost two key pieces at the wide receiver spot. You got a whole new wide receiver trio coming in here in your mock here. It's going to be tough. I think the Steelers are still going to be right where they are. The Ravens are going to be better without their injuries. The Bengals just went to the Super Bowl, so it's a really tough division. So I don't know if there's any guarantees.
All right. Well, again, sorry for rambling on a little bit. Apologies to everyone, but that's the Browns and Vikings mock offseason. We think that there's going to be plenty of intrigue surrounding both those teams, especially with the question marks surrounding the roster. This is going to be a fun draft, and, we'll be back Monday to talk Combine, talk some other teams as well. We got Baltimore, and then we got the team hogging almost all the first-round draft picks, Philadelphia Eagles. We're very excited for it. We'll see you guys on Monday, but until then, have a great weekend. Take care. From Nick, Durst, and I,